Hey friends, this is the World Maker Books YouTube channel. We are here for the thrice weekly reading from EarthSong Overture by Mark Wandry. We're at about 11% through the book currently. So we are going to hang out for a few minutes, chit chat, and then when, hopefully when there's a couple of people here, we will get started. And, I almost forgot. I need to be able to, I forgot. I have to be able to comment, and that means getting on my account, finding this live, and let's see what's live. We should come up. No, of course not. Goodness gracious. All right, sorry folks. Next time I will have this done before we get started. World Maker Books. There we go. I don't know how they... Oh, no, that's two. Stop. Go back. That's a good thing there's nobody here watching this. Go back. Part 3, currently live. Part 3, be quiet. Okay. All right. So we're going to wait until about 5 after before we do this. If anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat. We will try to get to them. Let me remind Mark that we are live so that he can come into the chat. Video is live. Please come into chat. All right, one of these days I'll remember to do all these things beforehand, but that's why I have a list, a little piece of paper that says things like open live video. So you get a little behind the scenes look. And then open Joy's account to chat. And then make sure Mark is available. And finally, post on Facebook. All right. All the things, yes, all the things I have to remember to do next time. We're going to wait until about 5 after, so that's about 7 more minutes before we start the reading. If anybody's got any questions, holler them out. In the meantime, I don't know, I guess we can just hang out a little bit. What have you guys been doing today? I was supposed to go to the post office, but since, let's try that. Sorry. I was supposed to go to the post office, but since the person that commissioned the bag that I was going to mail hasn't paid me for it yet, I didn't go to the post office. I did, however, go to the grocery store and spent a ridiculous amount of money for a very small amount of groceries. And unlike normal, I was actually watching the prices. So I'm a little concerned. In other news, I've also hung out my shingle for editing, line edit, copy edit, proofread, developmental edit, series Bibles, all those things. So if any of you need any of that kind of services, just drop me a line and let me know. joy.wandry@gmail.com. Easy peasy. I'll try and put that down in the show notes below. I'll also link Mark's website, which I probably should have done already. Silly me. I've got a bunch of but live and learn. Anywho, I'm hoping we'll get some more folks coming in. I think I'm going to... Did I freeze? Maybe for a minute. I think I'm going to go over to Facebook real quick and try to make another post. Oh, my computer is on its last limb. Please join us for part 3 of EarthSong Overture. Now, live on YouTube at... It doesn't find that. Okay. Still doesn't find that. Maybe it's just /WorldMakerBooks. Still doesn't find it. Okay. Let's try this. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Okay. How do I find that link? No say. Go away. Go away. Go away. Go away. Go away. Good Lord. That took long enough. Keep hoping some more people will show up. We got about 3 more minutes. I just want to go, yes, leave. That's not what I wanted to do. Go away. I just love computers. Some days. There we go. Copy. Nope. Having issues over here. Bet it didn't save that as a draft either. Sorry, you guys. Post. All right, we'll start reading in just a minute. And let's put that comment in there, paste, and go. Okay. All right, now that I've done what I can do for this, let's get started. Last we saw, Victor was in lockup and reading aloud to a bunch of disciples from his Gideon's Bible. And that was the end of chapter 2. So chapter 3 starts, Mindy tried not to yawn as she took another bite of her sandwich. The view out the window was the same as always, nice, but not what she'd prefer. The stars, there we go. The stars were far more interesting than the mountains to her. Being a customs broker offered a small mental challenge. She'd lucked into the career trying to survive after her previous one imploded. Then she'd met Jake while studying for the federal exam a little over a year ago. She set the half-finished sandwich down and wished Jake wasn't in Seattle on business so they could have lunch together. It helped the day pass quickly when she had some time with him. Without even realizing it, she found herself trolling the message boards of the World Astronomy Association. She was still a member in good standing, despite her little problem. Not that it was rarefied company. Send in a check for $25 a year and anyone could be a member. In the members section, there were no links next to her name. Even most of the hobbyists had some links. She felt her mood darkening, so she navigated away. SETI was her next stop. There she was, in the gallery of past associates. Mindy Patoy, radio astronomer. SETI had lost all government funding several years ago. Despite that, there were still links by her name. Even with the loss of fortune, she still had friends at SETI. Mindy followed one of the links by her name. The speech was still there. She clicked it. There she was, a few years younger, standing at a podium with several other members of SETI. They looked excited, almost jittery. The podium had a dozen microphones and a few digital recorders sitting on it. All the major news agencies were present, and many of the small ones as well. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, she said, SETI wishes to announce that we have isolated the first signal of extraterrestrial origin. The press exploded for several seconds, and they tried to get them to quiet down. We received the signal at 1934 hours, 2 nights ago, at the Arecibo Radio Observatory. It was 28 seconds in length, and it hasn't repeated at this point. Signal analysis has confirmed the signal is non-terrestrial and contains structure. The rest was drowned out by demanding questions from the press. The recording ended, and there was a link to further details about the story. Stupid move, Mindy grumbled. She'd watched it at least 1,000 times, and it got stupider every time. What were they thinking? There was only one radioscope monitoring that section of sky, so there'd been no corroboration. Furthermore, one of the 2 hard drives tasked with recording the data had failed, so there was only one original copy. The final nail in the coffin was that the signal was a partial. It started in the middle of a repeating sequence, and when that sequence began again, it never reached the same spot. Or it was 2 separate incomplete batches of data. She never found out. The signal should have led to a major effort to find the exact origin. They should have received research grants and international attention. Instead, they jumped the shark. The international astronomy community lambasted them. SETI's reputation, already considered by many to be the laughingstock of astronomy, was murdered. There had never been a lot of federal money, but there had been enough to keep them alive. That went away almost overnight when SETI was accused of trying to create public hysteria and defraud the taxpayers. She was about to close the browser and return to her life when the background instant messenger pinged. The name made her roll her eyes and laugh. Timing was everything. She clicked and a window popped up. Hi, stranger. Been a while, she typed. Still moving freight? Yep. Still making pizzas? She asked. LOL, yeah. Pays the bills and keeps me listening for ET. How's that going? She asked. Slow, real slow. You been walking down memory lane again? Saw your IP address pop up on the server just now. Spy, she accused. I saw a used blade server on eBay yesterday. Got a bonus coming in and was going to send it to you. I saw that too, but tips are down. We appreciate it. She nodded and thought, no problem. Not going to spend it getting married to that guy? Fishing? She wondered aloud. Just a boyfriend, she typed. We miss you, the words appeared. I fucked the whole program up. You heard the call. You were in the chair when it came in. We haven't forgotten that. I should have slowed it down. The press conference was a mistake, she typed. We all decided it was a good idea after we drank that bar dry the night before. The screen was quiet for a minute, and Mindy considered saying she had to get back to work when her old friend typed again. You know we've never stopped working that signal. We chewed it up one side and down the other, Mindy wrote. A couple of the guys got some supercomputer cycles. Guys at DARPA lost a bet, LOL. Mindy sat up in her chair. Did you find something? 19 seconds of signal, seamless data stream up until it suddenly stopped. Come on, man, she typed furiously. I wouldn't call it a breakthrough, he typed, but we're now sure there's more than one level to the signal. Her hands were shaking as another line came in. There's a terminator at segments. Then it was repeating? We think it was. The answer came. It's so fucking complex, we'd probably have spent a decade chewing it with PCs if we hadn't gotten those supercomputer cycles. Even with that, we've only just scratched the surface. Anything else? Once we had the terminators, we isolated 5-second blocks. Is there commonality? Not at all, the answer came. Fuck, Mindy typed, then said it aloud. Someone across the office looked at her and she lowered her head in embarrassment. Our thoughts exactly, the screen displayed. There's more there, but we need more supercomputer time. But we're missing part of the signal. If we find enough key points, maybe we can figure out the Rosetta Stone. Mindy considered and shrugged. It was possible. With only a partial signal? There are 3 complete packets, the reply said. Only time will tell. Thanks for catching me up, she typed. I have to get back to work now. Sure, but I thought you'd also like to know that WAA has another witch hunt underway. Who is it this time? British amateur Alicia Benjamin. She calls her place Worth Hill Observatory in southern England. A month ago, she said she saw one of the bigger NEO asteroids pushed out of its orbit by something. Something? The video is fascinating. Looks like an explosion. Anyway, the powers that be have dubbed it a hoax and are out to crucify her. I'm really starting to hate the WAA again, she typed. Is the rock moved? Yes, it is. Orbit has changed, but not what you would call radically. Evidence of an impact? She asked. No one else was watching. Which asteroid? She asked. LM-245. It's about 12 miles long, and it doesn't orbit closer than 0.5 AU for another 50,000 years. The community is still trying to analyze its new orbit. Mindy already had the data up on her internet browser. Aside from its size, there wasn't much interesting about LM-245. It was believed to be carbonaceous and in a relatively stable orbit. It's behind the sun now. Should come out in 30 days. I'll keep an eye on the story, she typed. Thanks for letting me know. Do you know anything about what's going on in Central Park? New York City? Came the reply. No, why? Nothing, I guess. Good to chat with you, Mindy. You too, Harold. Lieutenant Harper managed to find an excuse to swing by Central Park. The changes in just one day were profound. I'm going to breathe more. Concrete barriers now surrounded the park from 79th Street up to 97th and along 5th Avenue in Central Park West. It was a complete cordon with a no-fly zone overhead. He hadn't seen this much of a federal presence since 9/11. NYPD seemed relegated to traffic control, and there was no sign of the FBI. He couldn't even see the concrete barriers in the center of the meadow, just visible from West Drive. Another wall had been put up, this one even higher. He knew from newscasts that a camouflage net covered the center of activity. With nothing new to learn, he moved on. He'd gotten scant sleep the night before. After leaving Victor in the lockup, Billy spent the remainder of his shift finishing paperwork and working his contacts. In the 16 years he'd been on the force, he'd made a lot of them. He touched base with most of them, trying to figure out what was going on in the park. He didn't find out shit. It wasn't that they wouldn't talk, it was that they didn't know anything. He worked a case for 2 hours, a snatch and grab at a Park Avenue jewelry store, then signed off and went home. One of the advantages of working the early shift was the parking space was usually open, and today was no different. I know. Billy waved to Mr. Nebowitz, who was taking out his recycling. He climbed the stairs and went through the door, locking it behind him, and took off his holster with the gun still in it and set it on the hall table, as usual. Then he added his phone and keys to the pile. He turned the TV on and walked into the kitchen for microwave goodness. He wasn't proud of his bachelor life. Truth was, he couldn't quite remember the last time a lady had graced his doorstep. He thought it was 3 years, but when he tried to nail it down, he got depressed and stopped trying to remember. 5 minutes in the microwave and dinner was served. He carried his steaming meal into the main room of his studio apartment and sat at the coffee table to watch the news while eating, just like every other day. Oh, God. A typhoon was raging in the South Pacific. In northern Africa, the Four Horsemen continued to wage their never-ending competition for supremacy. Currently, war had a slight edge over pestilence, but famine was gaining quickly. Death was satisfied with playing cleanup. Dueling groups of scientists continued to study the environment. One group was insisting the world was getting hotter, the other argued it was getting colder. Tax day in the USA was approaching, and a march of 1 million people protesting the increase of the flat tax from 25% to 29% was planned for April 15th. Representatives from the controlling Democratic Party scoffed at the tax protesters, calling them government-hating racists opposed to helping the poor. The former president was unavailable for comment. Billy tossed his empty food tray into the garbage, grabbed a random import beer, and went back to watch more of the ageless decay of society. A couple of hours went by where he progressed from the sex and depravity of the news to the ever-boring and pointless humor of network late-night television. It was nearly midnight, and he was beginning to fade. The national late news was back on, with no mention of Central Park and the massive federal involvement. Just before he pressed the off button, an international news segment came on. Tonight, we have a developing story in China's infamous Tiananmen Square in the northern city of Beijing. Thanks to a heavy government presence, it's been a largely peaceful place. After the 1989 student protests, the government carefully controlled access to reduce the possibility of a duplicate protest. Even through revolutionary periods that involved other city landmarks, the Vault of Heaven remained free from demonstrations. Best known as a place to find hundreds practicing the ancient art of Tai Chi in the mornings, it is now the site of a new protest. Thousands of people have arrived, seemingly overnight. In a gathering reminiscent of the Occupy movement made famous in various United States cities years ago, the Vault of Heaven has been completely taken over. Some estimates place the number of occupiers at more than 1,000, while official Chinese government statements say less than 200. The image cut from a stock photo of the Vault of Heaven with its ancient columns and gold inlaid crimson beams and steps to a long lens shot showing cheap tents and people holding signs. Most were in Chinese, but Billy could see a few in English. One said, "Heaven's Gate," and another said, really sorry about the yawning, guys. Another said, "The Seven Heavens." The military cordon was obvious but subdued, with barriers and a few soldiers keeping anyone from going in or out. Officially, the Beijing government has taken a hands-off position, preferring to let the people inside become bored or hungry and leave of their own accord. However, sources within the government have stated off the record that this event will not be allowed to grow into any kind of national statement. Already, the government has exercised its often controversial control to cut off social media sites from the inside, though a few images did make it onto Instagram. Now it showed those images. Some were people like the pictures outside. Some were like the pictures outside, but with people who apparently were the leaders. Some were of camping equipment, and one was of the police. The last one made him sit up suddenly. It was a picture of a low, milky white stage. The stage was round, about 20 feet across. Several people were standing on the lowest steps, hands raised toward the center where a circular ring was suspended in the air. It was spring in Beijing, the same as in New York City, but through the ring, Billy could see a field covered in snow. "Oh my God," Billy said. The scene ended. He snatched up the cable controller and backed up the live replay DVR, freezing it on the dais and ring. There was the portal to heaven, just as Victor described, and the sketch artist drew. Billy almost fell on his face, scrambling to retrieve his phone. The email from Jennifer, the sketch artist, was there, but the phone wouldn't open it. "Son of a bitch," he cursed, and spent a minute forwarding it to his private email, despite it being a violation of department regulations. Then another minute, finding his seldom-used tablet. The tablet was a gift from his sister years before, and he thanked his forethought in leaving it plugged in. He activated it and signed into his email, found the messages. "I have 12,882 unread emails," and opened the picture attachments. There was the portal, surprisingly like the one on Instagram posted by the Chinese occupiers. "Victor," Billy said, hand to his mouth. "Man, oh man, what did you stumble onto?" He clicked to the next image and spent a long time looking at the angel. He also thought about how Victor had said the other side was at first a snowy plain and then woods at night. He looked up at the frozen frame on his TV. The winter tableau was still there. He thought he could see a frozen lake and maybe some bushes. Everything was covered in thick snow. Not only had Victor apparently been telling the truth, but the portal in Central Park was not the only one. He sat scanning the news channels for hours. Only the BBC mentioned the events in New York City. "We're currently investigating." And in Beijing, "Is this another Tiananmen Square in the making?" As regular programming gave way to the mind-numbing content of late-night talk shows, Billy abandoned them for his tablet and surfed the web late into the evening, looking for any other mentions of the portals. Billy Harper wasn't the only one who'd noticed the Instagram images. Agents of the Australian, Egyptian, Russian, and United States governments also took notice. Their observations made it to interested parties whose reactions varied from amazement to fear and consternation. An analyst in Bluffdale, Utah, picked up the images, added them to others in a highly secure data packet, and sent it to another secure site. Sorry, guys, my nose is running. Mark Volan's computer buzzed, alerting him to high-priority traffic. He got out of bed, where he'd been trying to sleep, trying to get to sleep, and entered the 22-digit encryption code the fingerprints secured dongle he wore in a necklace generated. In a second, he was looking at the Instagram pictures. Right? In a second, he was looking at the Instagram pictures. He reviewed them for a minute, then typed a simple reply: kill all instances, disavow the sources. His agency director had been right. There were more than one of these portals. That meant there could be a lot of them. Primary data still being analyzed suggested at least 5 more. Alien invasion, he wondered, then snorted. He picked up his agency-issued secure cell phone and speed dialed. Get in here, he said, and hung up. He pulled on a pair of boxers and walked to the door. By the time he opened it, an agent was standing there. I want that Spraycrete dome installed tonight, he told his assistant. That won't be cheap, sir. Does it look like I give a fuck? Find someone who can do it and get them there right now. Get it done. See to it personally. Keep the lighting very low inside so the crews can't get too good a look. Damn thing glows in the dark, his assistant said. Then throw a fucking tarp over it. Just do it. Volant closed the door in the agent's face. Right, Becky? He plopped into a chair and sighed. It had been at least 24 hours since he'd had more than an hour of sleep. In his younger years, he could go as much as 96 hours without sleep if drugs were available. Getting old, he grunted to the empty room. He grabbed an old-fashioned notepad and jotted a few things down. He was old school. You could be 100% certain that paper was destroyed. Bites had a weird tendency to come back and bite you in the ass. He chuckled at his own humor, thinking he had to save that one for one of his agency training sessions. Then, figuring it might not be the last time he was woken up that night, he took the comforter and a pillow from the bed and grabbed a couple hours' sleep in the chair. He felt the comforting lump of his venerable Sig Sauer P220 Equinox under his thigh. Dr. George Osgood leaned back in the chair. This is chapter 4, sorry. Dr. George Osgood leaned back in the chair, flipped his glasses up on his receding hairline, and sighed while rubbing the bridge of his nose. The current undertaking had quickly become one of the most frustrating of his long career. At least half of his staff from Houston and the embeds at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory were there with him now. He had access to state-of-the-art equipment brought in from all over the world at his request. They had spared no expense. The greatest minds in the country were at his beck and call, as long as he carefully parsed his words. Yet, after working tirelessly for almost 3 weeks, he was no closer to substantive answers than the day he started. Here's the latest particle physics report, a physicist said, handing him a thick stack of paper printouts. Another annoyance of the NSA's insistence on maintaining compartmentalization, they emailed as little data as possible. There were probably 100 government couriers at any time flying around the world for this one project, booby-trapped with secure attaché cases handcuffed to their wrists. Did they have anything useful to say this time? Mostly they wanted to know where we came up with such a unique set of readings, and then they accused us of making up data for them to run. Figures, Osgood said, and tossed the papers onto a cart piled high with similar reports. He snorted and kicked ineffectually at the cart. It's their way to avoid admitting defeat. They did say the readings from the neutron target suggest bosons. They just can't confirm. Of course they can't, Osgood grumbled. The instruments used to capture subatomic particles and taste their flavor wasn't, by its nature, portable. A huge amount of the Hadron Collider in France was the detection array. Even a small one was the size of a modest office building. Did they have anything on the gamma ray problem? They'd recently realized that activating the device might result in the emission of some subatomic particles as well as gamma rays. Dosimeters at the Mount Sinai Hospital almost 2 miles away had detected these readings. Best guess, Osgood nodded, then shrugged. What else could he ask for? The man continued. The thing might be made of neutrons and antineutrons. Well, Osgood said, and looked at his nemesis. That was interesting. That theory might explain the potential energy readings. Wouldn't Mr. Roddenberry be pleased with himself? Doctor? Nothing, Osgood said, and shook his head. Thanks for the reports. The man went about his business, and Osgood took out the tablet he used to organize research efforts and grumbled. After a minute, he heaved himself to his feet and trundled over to the food cart. They kept it stocked 24/7 with sandwiches, donuts, coffee, imported water, and an assortment of other snacks, as research never stopped. He grabbed half a tuna salad sandwich, plopped it on a plate with some chips, and took it back to his workstation. An hour later, Osgood got up and headed out of his office in the main research trailer and across the area nicknamed Portal City. 12 semi-permanent structures and 6 portable trailers surrounded a concrete dome. Dozens of cable traces were set along the ground and strung through overhead wooden supports, moving back and forth like a telephone exchange in India. He walked toward the dome. It was 20 meters across and painted in neutral earth tones, so it didn't stand out. There was only one exit, a pressure-tight airlock that currently stood with both doors open. A pair of NSA agents guided the airlock, one on either side. They held their machine guns like they knew how to use them and regarded Osgood coolly as he approached. Identification? One asked as he walked up. He'd long given up fighting the daily indignities of repeatedly identifying himself to someone who saw him on an hourly basis. He held out the RF identification, and the guard touched his scanner plate to it. The scanner gave a small beep, and a green light came on. "Proceed," the man said. Inside the dome, the portal dais glowed dimly. Sensors registered his entrance. LED lights came alive, overwhelming the inner glow, but not reducing the impressive, pearly, swirling otherworldliness of the material. "I hate that thing," he said as he walked around it. He was careful to step over the dozens of cables lying around and to avoid all the instrument stands. Most scientists had a deep-seated loathing and suspicion for anything that violated the known rules of physics. The portal definitely qualified as suspicious. He had to chuckle, though, as he remembered the official story behind the dome and the scientific community and NASA presence. They said a research satellite from the Gemini era with a thermal generator had crashed. "Bullshit," he said, as if anyone would buy that. It was a sad statement on modern education, he thought, though most of the public completely believed it. There were hundreds of protesters from organizations such as Greenpeace and Earth First holding daily vigils, protesting NASA's pollution of the cosmos. If a satellite crashed into Central Park, there should have been 20,000 cell phone videos of it. That there were none of the portal delivery or the aliens stunned him. Was that on purpose? It was an interesting premise. Osgood walked over to the central control computer and glanced at the schedule. He could hear the team coming. A series of heavy alloy steel plates was arranged around a segment of the dais, and the laser was set up and ready to go. A minute later, the team came in wearing heavy green lab coats and dark laser protective goggles around their necks. "Good morning, Dr. Osgood," the head of the team said. "Morning. You on the first run?" "No, sir. We ran 2 sequences last night." "Results?" Osgood asked. "Not a damn thing. We've tried 6 different frequencies so far, same results on all of them. It's almost perfectly reflective." "Almost," Osgood wondered. "Well," one of the techs said, "there's a 0.0019% deviation from the normal. We're not certain, but we think it's being lost in atmospheric absorption." "And the radiation?" One of the more interesting side effects of their investigation was that any attempts to damage or sample the dais resulted in a release of radiation, as well as the high-energy stuff. The release could even be neutrinos and elementary particles. Without detection gear, who knew? He hung out and observed as they set up. When they were ready, he helped himself to a pair of goggles as they energized the 5,000-watt laser. The laser had enough power to burn through flesh and bone. The goggles were insurance against a bouncer. Thus far, the shields had caught it all. They calculated the results after the run. They were exactly the same as all the others. "Just doesn't make sense," the laser team leader said. They set up probes to sample the air for residue ablated by the laser. They found nothing outside of normal air ionization. "There should be something." "Doesn't seem possible," Osgood agreed. "Right out of Star Trek," one of the techs said, and the others laughed. "What did you say?" Osgood asked, his eyes wide. The man looked worried, afraid he'd said something wrong. "No, please, what did you mean?" "Well, you know how they do stuff like this in sci-fi and Star Trek?" Yeah, but I want to hear you say it," the man explained, and Osgood nodded, the smile growing wider on his face. "I don't know why we didn't think of that before." "Think of what?" Osgood looked over and saw his nemesis, Agent Mark Volant, standing just outside the airlock. He groaned inwardly. "I think I figured out how this thing works. Well, at least why we can't sample it." "Okay," Volant said. "Why not?" "See the laser beam?" The laser was on low power mode and continued executing an endurance test. "No," Volant said. Osgood realized he didn't have filter goggles, so he got a pair and held them out to Volant. The NSA man looked at him dubiously for a moment, then came inside. In the weeks Osgood had run the investigation, he'd only seen the agent inside a handful of times. Volant looked at the goggles. Better put them on. It's not on high power, but it is still dangerous. Osgood pulled a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, put one in his mouth, and leaned carefully over his shield. The cigarette flashed in an instant. An alarm went off, and one of the materials analysts gave Osgood a dark look, but didn't say anything. See, wouldn't want that in your eyes, would you? I didn't think any of you eggheads smoked, Volant said, slipping the goggles over his perfect haircut. We have bad habits, just like everyone else. With the goggles in place, Volant could see a ruby line running from the apparatus to the dais. When it struck the pearly surface, it rebounded as if hitting a mirror and was caught by a shield. The shield was wired into the computers and was dutifully recording the energy. Okay, I see it. So what? That thing is pretty shiny. It's no surprise it reflects the laser. The most reflective mirrors we have are 99% reflective, Osgood explained. Certainly, the very expensive ones, like these guys work with, are 99.5%. That means some of the light is lost, absorbed by the mirror, and incorrectly reflected. This, he said, pointing at the dais, is perfectly reflecting to 3 decimal places. Volant looked at the dais. It was shiny, but it wasn't that damn shiny. So how's it doing it? What kind of material could be that reflective? Considering that you can see through it, sort of? Nothing. We just realized that it isn't a material at all. You eggheads like to be confusing? Volant asked. Not on purpose, Osgood said, and chuckled. You see, it is reflecting perfectly because it is not a material. It is a damned force field. The agent considered what that meant while Osgood went to his computer and began verifying his suspicions. The force field theory explained everything, even the energy emission. When they assaulted the dais, there was an energy flux when it responded. Most scientists considered Star Trek-type force fields impossible. He glanced at the dais and smiled. I have some info for you, too, Volant said. Osgood looked at the agent in his immaculate black suit with a conspicuous bulge. There are 8 more of these that we are certain of. Moscow, Beijing, Sydney, Berlin, Buenos Aires, Tokyo, London, and Johannesburg. There could be one in Paris, but the frogs are being tight-lipped. So are the Indians. There are 10 portals like this? That's stupendous. And ominous. I don't follow you. What are they here for? What do they mean? Well, said Osgood, flipping off the laser. He ignored the protests of the laser team and stepped on the bottom step of the dais. The round portal sprang to life. Volant took an unconscious step back. The portal aligned with the person who stepped on the dais, as always. It was daytime on the other side. The alien forest was clearly visible, as well as the sky, which had a slightly different color from Earth's. Reports say that some alien centaur delivered the portal. I read that report too, Volant said. We haven't been able to find the punk who saw it delivered or your fucking alien. Some stupid NYPD detective let him go. Osgood shrugged. We have a warrant out for him. It's some black gutter rat. He'll turn up eventually. Osgood made a dismissive gesture. It was probably a story told to cover up the fact that a police officer saw the event, not some transient. Volant eyed him appraisingly. We considered that, he said, but that account still stands as the only modestly credible story of this thing's arrival. He looked at the laser for a long moment, then lifted his goggles. Some of the other portals are in countries that are not our allies. If this is a gift or some kind of crazy alien finger puzzle, my bosses need to know. Osgood sighed and shook his head. You've been at this for weeks, and all you can tell me is it has a force field and is full of energy. That's rather simplistic. Oh, stow it, Volant snapped angrily. 3 weeks of research and millions of dollars spent, not to mention an increasingly suspicious press, and you give me Star Trek? Osgood shrugged and Volant fumed. Do you have any clue about those symbols, at least? Osgood turned from where he was standing on the dais and looked at the portal ring. All around the edge, intricate symbols were moving, morphing, and occasionally disappearing. We haven't a clue. Volant looked like he was ready to become violent. I told you we can't decipher the symbols unless we can bring in linguistic experts. Absolutely not, Volant said and made a chopping motion with his hand. We can't let another group of eggheads into the box. He looked at the symbols. Why don't you know anything about them yet? Because I'm a physicist, not a linguist, you troglodyte. Dr. Osgood, I expect much more from an educated man. The two regarded each other coldly for several moments. Osgood eventually added a little more info. We did a simple test and found that the markings are interactive. What kind of test? Osgood walked up the steps to the portal. He caught his foot on one of the numerous cables lying there and stumbled before catching himself. Careful, Doctor, the laser team lead yelled. Osgood nodded and stepped away from the cables. Once sure of his footing, he reached out toward the hovering portal. Volant flinched visibly, making Osgood smile inside. He watched the symbols moving and changing for a moment, then touched one. It and all the others froze in place. The portal is just a projection, Osgood explained, and moved his finger through the portal and then back out. But this is fully interactive. He slid his finger, and the marking followed it. As the symbol moved, it encountered another symbol, and the two morphed together into a new one. Interactive, he said, and released the new symbol. The dim blue symbol flared slightly and melted away. The march of the other symbols resumed. Can we resume our series, Dr. Osgood? Osgood glanced up at the laser team leader and nodded, stepping off the dais to continue his verbal jousting with the NSA agent. The portal instantly disappeared. The laser team went back to work after they cleared the cigarette smoke from the working area. Then they replaced the targets, setting them on the far side of the dais, away from where the laser emitter rested on its tripod. 2 days before, when they first started, they'd fired a laser over the dais when the portal wasn't active. This time, once they were ready, a technician in a protective suit stepped on the dais, reactivating the portal. The agent and the senior scientists watched the operation with mixed interest. As the techs prepared to fire the laser, Osgood slid his goggles back into place, and Volant followed suit. What about the alien planet? Volant asked. Any idea where it is? We've taken a series of images of the sky, but none of the star patterns match, Osgood said. High-resolution pictures of the trees show flora like Earth's in the Cambrian period. The grass on the ground could have come from Earth. The techs turned on their laser. The light went into the portal, but didn't hit the target behind it. Volant leaned around to see the other side. He had a view facing the opposite way, in the same field, on a planet who knew where. That's cool, he said. Osgood's main control computer sounded an alarm, and he went to investigate. What is it? Volant asked. There was an energy flux from the dais when they fired the laser. Dangerous? Volant asked, watching the alien artifact with keen interest. Not in the short term. Any effects on the other side? Osgood asked the laser team. Scott, the team leader called, see if you can spot the impact point. You bet, the man in protective gear standing on the dais said. He stepped to the top and moved toward the portal. The gear was ill-fitting, and he caught a foot on the same cable Osgood had earlier. With the cumbersome gear, though, it wasn't nearly as easy to recover. He did an almost comical spin pirouette maneuver and fell backwards. As he passed through the laser, it splashed off his protective suit, sending shattered laser beams bouncing all over the room. Safeties detected the wild laser beams and shut off the emitter in a fraction of a second. Someone screamed. Scott backpedaled, trying to get his balance, and finally tripped on the edge of the portal. It had never displayed any sort of solidity before. Of course, no one had ever tried to go through before. He fell backwards through the portal, and it swallowed him. There was a deep bass thrum sound that shook the concrete dome slightly. The portal flashed from milky white to deep azure blue, then back to white. Everyone stared in shock at Scott, now lying on his back in the alien field. Holy shit! Someone yelled. Someone else screamed again. Scott sat up, yanked off his goggles, and said something, only no one could hear a sound except the screaming. Who the fuck is screaming? Volant asked and looked around. Oh, he said. One of the laser technicians was staggering around, bright red arterial blood spraying from a carotid artery neatly opened by a reflected 1 kilowatt laser, bouncing off one wildly gesticulating technician as he fell through the portal. Someone call a medic, Volant ordered. A pair of technicians were running toward the dais, obviously intent on mounting it to assist their fallen comrade on the other side. Stop, Osgood bellowed. They came to a skidding halt. Is this being recorded? Someone said it was. On the other side, Scott crawled to the portal and reached toward Earth. His hand smacked into the portal on the other side, as if it were covered in glass. The look of confusion on his face changed to one of horror. He stood up, hands unconsciously using the portal as support, and looked around at his surroundings. Someone do something, one of the techs said. Osgood snatched a clipboard, flipped over the papers on it, and snatched a Sharpie from his pocket. He wrote in a shaking hand as he walked to the base of the portal and held the clipboard up for Scott to see. The man read his writing and gawked with unabashed disbelief. Can't someone help him? Organized chaos ensued as everyone ran around and accomplished absolutely nothing. Eggheads, Volant said, reaching into his pocket and lobbing his Victorinox Swiss Army knife through the portal. Scott caught it, and a second later the hovering portal snapped off. One-way trip, he said, and walked over to Osgood. Volant took the clipboard from the scientist and looked at what he'd written. Can you breathe? Volant chuckled. Fucking eggheads. The weekend getaway to the cabin had been Jake's idea. For weeks, both Jake and Mindy had noticed their relationship was beginning to cool off. They used to share a sense of direction, and now that wasn't there. As the days went by, Mindy began to wonder if she'd allowed her life to be derailed by events beyond her control. The weekend was Jake's attempt to reverse the course. Mindy sat in one of the rockers on the cabin's porch and watched the sunrise. It was beautiful. Jake was sleeping in while she sipped tea and watched the night give way to dawn. What Jake hadn't realized when he'd booked the cabin was that the southern view was only a mile from the interstate route between their house and her job in downtown Portland. As the sky lightened, she had a distant but clear view of the same observatory she saw most nights. The tears came completely uninvited and unexpected. A trickle became a stream, and that turned into torrents. She found herself kneeling on the edge of the deck, holding one of the support beams and sobbing. A swirl of spring fog enveloped the valley below, reminding her of a distant galaxy. She missed the stars so much. It felt like a piece of her soul had been torn out and never returned. I miss it so much, she confessed to the night. She dropped back onto her bottom and sat there as the sun finished reclaiming the day. Finally, the tears slowed and stopped. The pain was gone, replaced by a determination she hadn't had in a very long time. Mindy grabbed her phone from her pocket. Even at the remote cabin site, she had 3 bars. She sent a text message to an old friend. "Got a minute to talk?" This early in the morning, she wasn't surprised to get a quick answer. "Sure, what's up?" "How's the code breaking coming?" she asked. "Slow. We'd make more progress if we could land that funding." "That's why I'm texting. I hear you're looking for someone to help with funding, fixing computers, and listening to the stars." "Don't tease me, Mindy. I thought you had a job and a fiancé." Mindy took a breath and typed an answer. It was easier than she thought. An hour later, she walked down the dirt road to the cabin rental office. She'd asked the cab to pick her up there instead of at their cabin. She'd left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter in the cabin. Goodbye to Jake. She desperately hoped it wasn't as lame as it sounded when she wrote it. She'd tried to apologize in many different ways, but eventually she just settled on, "I'm so sorry. Goodbye." She glanced back as she walked down the hill, her weekend bag over her shoulder. The cabin slowly fell out of view, and she turned to the winding road leading to her future. In the shadows of the cabin's window, Jake quietly watched her walk away and didn't try to stop her. Okay, that's a chapter break, so I think we're going to stop here. We'll start here again on Tuesday at 8 p.m. Becky, got any questions? Yeah, the Goka and the Karamon are terrible, but they're a different universe. So thank you for watching. Appreciate it. Again, this was a live reading from EarthSong Overture by Mark Wandry. You can find it on Amazon, and I believe it is on Kindle Unlimited as well. This is Worldmaker Books, and if you have enjoyed this reading, please click like and subscribe, and click the little bell notification. That way you will hopefully get a notification every time we go live. This book we're going to continue reading every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern for half an hour, 40 minutes each time. We'll start the live about 5 minutes early. We'll start reading about 5 after 8 to give people time to get here. Because the lives are scheduled, you can show up quite early and talk to each other in the comments if you like. We will hopefully see you all Tuesday. Thanks again for your time, and share with your friends if you liked it. Bye. I keep